His innovative filmmaking techniques have become a staple in editing software and storytelling. He's known for bringing still images to life, aiding documentarians with movement and dramatic effect. We're delighted to be joined by the Ken Burns, award-winning documentarian and filmmaker. He is also the founder and director of Florentine Films. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Layla, for having me. So excited to be with you.
Yeah, this is a thrill for us in particular, as a journalist, and I speak for a lot of people who have ever made films using pictures, is that we have used your technique countless times. And I want to get into your soon-to-be trip to Charleston for your latest film, which is very exciting. But if we could, I just kind of want to talk a little bit about how you came to be a noun and a verb in filmmaking. When did this whole technique sort of become born?
Well, I went to Hampshire College, which was a new experimental school that opened in 1970. I went in 71, so I was a kind of an original guinea pig. And most of my film teachers were also still photographers, and they taught me a respect for the still photograph. So I was trying to figure out, because I was interested in history, how to make the past come alive and not hold those photographs at arm's length. So I began to explore with this energetic eye, treating an old photograph the way a feature film maker would, a wide shot, a medium, a close, a tilt, a pan, a reveal, and all of it to sort of will it to life and not just move in it, but listen to it. Were those troops tramping? Were the cannon firing? Was the bat cracking? Was the crowd cheering? And so we began to sort of develop a style that helped will these old photographs alive. And so that's what's become my friend Steve Jobs, or he became a friend afterwards, invented the Ken Burns effect for downloading your photographs and panning and zooming and doing all that sort of stuff, which is sort of a crude version of what we're trying to do to wake an old photograph up and therefore wake the past up. We tend to be kind of arrogant. Those of us who've survived think that we know a little bit more than the people who came before us. In most cases, that's not true. And we've tried to give full value to how people lived and loved and fought and died in the past.
Indeed, and that's just it. The Ken Burns effect, which is used all over, is a lot in journalism, certainly in documentary making. What is it about the documentary that intrigues you? Because that is certainly what you are known for. You have done countless. How many documentaries have you produced?
We're so busy, there's not time to sort of stop and count them, but all of them have been produced so that they could be broadcast on public television, which means no commercials and lots of afterlife in schools. And it's just been a way to sort of celebrate and get to all of them, but one is in American history. So there are ways to understand our country, to appreciate its complexity and its richness, and to understand our story. And nothing could be more important than the history of the American Revolution, which is our origin story, which is my next film.
And really, your documentaries have run the gamut. You talk about American history and knowing our American history, but you've done documentaries on everything from the Holocaust to jazz and beyond. So is there one particular subject that is near and dear to your heart? Is there one particular subject that you feel you haven't quite exhausted yet as a filmmaker?
Well, that's a wonderful question. I feel like I have the best job in the country. It educates all of my parts. I work with tremendously talented people. People say a Ken Burns film, but it's really, a couple dozen people make these things happen. And some of them I've worked with for 50 years, 40 years, 30 years, 25 years. If I were given 1,000 years to live, which I won't, I wouldn't run out of topics in American history. And so there's a sense of urgency and excitement about each new one. And I don't make films about things I know about and then tell you what you should know. The last time I checked, that's called homework. There's no quiz next Tuesday. What I want to share with you is the process of discovery. And there's so many parts of our phenomenally inspiring story that I want to get to, so that not one is more important than the other. It's just how to get to it. I remember when when we were finishing our series on World War II, I said, we're doing Vietnam next. And 10 and a half years later, we finished that. And before we were finished with Vietnam, I said, we're doing American Revolution. And that was more than 9 years ago.
Wow.
And this November 16th, a Sunday night, PBS will start broadcasting and streaming our big history of the American Revolution. So you see how long it takes. You have to incubate the ideas, work with scholars, work with historians and writers, go to the places, understand what people felt, and not just the familiar names, the top-down names, but the bottom-up folks
That's right.
that most people have never heard about, to make that past come alive.
Absolutely. Well, when we come after the break, I want to talk about the American Revolution and the process that you went through. You give a whole new appreciation for the process that it takes to actually put these projects together. So we're going to do that in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. We've been chatting with Ken Burns, acclaimed award-winning filmmaker who revolutionized the way films and documentaries are produced. Of course, you've heard the Ken Burns effect. Well, that's exactly who we're talking to, the Ken Burns. And we were just talking about your latest project, The American Revolution, it's titled, and you're going to be coming to Charleston for a special preview. It's going to hit the airwaves in the fall, but I want to talk about the process and why you chose the American Revolution and how Charleston has kind of made a seat at that table through this process.
Well, anybody who lives in South Carolina knows the centrality of the state and the city to the history of the American Revolution. I wanted to tell the story of the American Revolution because I felt that while we accept the violence of the Civil War and the violence of all of the 20th century wars we've been involved in, we sort of protect and encase the revolution with sort of the barnacles of sentimentality, and we don't see it for what it was, its own kind of civil war. And in many ways, our Civil War is a sectional war, one part of the country against the other, but this is within every town, within every community, within every family. There's usually divisions, loyalist and patriot, and so it makes it a much more interesting story. I think we probably protected it because we didn't want all the big ideas that are coming out of this revolution to be diminished, but in fact they're not. They're made even more inspiring by diving into them. And so we've got a 6-part, 12-hour series on the history of the American Revolution that comes out on November 16th. There are no photographs, there are no newsreels, and so we've had to figure out new ways to tell the story by filming reenactors, those who dress in French uniforms, our allies, British, Hessian, the German troops they hired to fight for the British side, loyalists, patriots, Patriot Continental Army, militias, women following the battlefield, which we think of this as mainly a male story. There are women and children around every army on both sides, and it's an interesting story and how ordinary civilians were affected. And I would say, if you were going to choose someplace not to be during the revolution, New Jersey and South Carolina would be it, because it was such contested territory and lots of guerrilla actions and hundreds of skirmishes. We think a fifth of all battlefield deaths happened in South Carolina in the revolution. And it wasn't just massive armies fighting each other. It was loyalists against patriots and patriots against loyalists, and very few British officers involved in many of those skirmishes. So it's a great story to tell.
I mean, you obviously, when you have to create these projects or when you embark on these projects, you become a historian. Have you ever taught history classes? Because I think you know more history than most historians on these topics.
Don't, and I'm so happy that when I'm at the Sotilli Theater, I'm going to be with Adrian Farewell of SCE TV, but also Kathleen Duvall, one of our advisors, and Walter Edgar, who's a historian who knows about this. We do become well versed in it, but we're really dependent on those scholars and writers and historians that help us along the way. And I get so excited. I mean, at dinner tables, I'm moving the salt and pepper shaker. Let me tell you how the Battle of Cowpens. Let me tell you what happens at Camden, at 96, at this place, at that place. And so we're always excited about the history. And as I say, we're not telling you what we know. We're sharing with you the process of discovery. And that's a better way. It's like saying, hey,
Yes.
Layla, story to tell you. And so it's, we'll come, we'll show some clips, we'll talk, have a conversation about it, and hope that will prime the pump for everybody in November to sort of participate
Indeed.
in the way we all did as a country when my Civil War series came out. Completely unexpected.
Right.
Everybody stopped in 1990 and watched it. They ran out of blank tapes. Remember when they
Oh
blank
gosh,
tape?
I remember those. I,
And
I still have a VHS player somewhere.
so,
Um,
so do I. So it's thrilling to share it, and I think
sure,
South Carolinians will be extremely proud at their role in this and the centrality of the state in
100%.
this, and particularly the city of Charleston.
I find it fascinating, though, that this particular series, you do not have any photographs. So
Right.
that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch. And I must ask you, before we go, what's your next project? What are you working on now that we can look forward to in the future?
Well, we're working on a lot of things. I've got 2 or 3 production teams, and we're working on a history of crime and punishment in the United States. We're doing a story after the Vietnam. I got curious about LBJ and his great society and what were the trade-offs to be able to get voting rights and civil rights pact and Medicare and Medicaid, public television, things we
Yes,
depend on today.
sure.
And, as I said, if I were given 1,000 years, which I won't be, I won't run out of topics in this glorious American history. And I think sometimes Americans have been taught that history is somehow boring, that it's not relevant. There's no greater teacher than history, and there's no greater way to arm yourself to understand the complexities of the present and to begin to imagine the kind of future without knowing where we've been.
But you have
And
a special gift, though, in making it interesting for the rest of us. You really bring history to life in everything that you do, Ken. And I'm just so excited for this American Revolution series. Again, special previews happening Wednesday, May 14th at the Sotila. You can get your tickets. Come and see Ken Burns talking with historians on stage there. And then make sure you set your DVRs for November 16th, when it's going to hit the airwaves on public television. Ken Burns, such a treat to have you with us. Thank you for taking the time.
so great to be with you, Layla. Thank you.
We're back in 2 minutes.